Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. I'm wearing Quest 3, and I believe David is wearing a 3S over there, as we appear today as last generation meta avatars in a VR studio built by David. It is Halloween, October 31st, 2024. Happy Halloween to everyone out there. We're using hand tracking and built-in microphones today. We've got tablets in front of us to see live comments from YouTube during our broadcast. And I'd like to send a sincere thank you to our members and patrons for directly supporting the work we do. In particular, thank you to Mike Manzano, as well as Podum, the creator of Smash Drums, HoloNet, and XR Developer News. I also see a Cleveroos and CJ7 in our comments, and Ryan B, as well as VR Gamer Dude out there. Thank you all for tuning in today. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So yes, it is Halloween, and if you want to find some good Halloween VR and mixed reality games, you can go on to UploadVR.com and find the list that we have put together there. But of course, VR Download is about technology and industry trends, the other side of the industry. A quick note here, we are both sick. Somehow there is a virus spreading around a fully remote company. That's strange somehow happening, but we all somehow got sick in the same week. So apologies if there's any sniffles or anything like that during this. We thought we'd just go ahead and do the show anyway. We have 4 or so sections today, as we've trying to split the show up into sections in recent weeks. Some of them are quite minor stories, but we still want to dig into them because we think they're important to note. And then we have some major areas of discussion for this week. So we'll start by talking about Bigscreen's cloud browser feature, which offers web Screenshare on Quest for a fee, $10 a month. We'll then talk about Wolvic Chromium 1.1 adding WebXR augmented reality. So that's an open source XR browser you can use instead of Meta's browser or Pico's browser. It's for standalone headsets, it's open source, and it's kind of getting feature parity in many ways over the past few months. We will then have a Meta section. We will start by discussing Meta Reality Labs revenue. Meta just had its Q3 earnings call, and we'll dig into that and talk about what it means and what those figures are. We'll then just note that the Horizon Hyperscape demo of photorealistic scenes via Gaussian splatting is now available outside the US. We will discuss Steam Link for Quest getting support for hand tracking. So you can just go straight into the Steam Link app for free and play VR chat with hand tracking on the PC version, or jump into some of the PC VR content that has hand tracking support, like Maestro, that hit rhythm game we've been reviewing recently. Our final meta topic will be talking about how Meta silently increased Quest 3's maximum GPU clock speed a few months ago, and that story just went up on UploadVR.com. So if you haven't caught that, you can go and read about it, or you can just wait till we discuss it here, because we'll try to cover as much of it as possible. We will then have an Apple section. We will talk about the elegant charging dock for Apple Vision Pro that a accessory maker made. It's something I think was really missing there, and it's great to see someone make it. We will talk about the fact that despite all the headlines you've been hearing that Apple is going to stop selling Vision Pro, in fact, its next move in November is to bring the headset to 2 new countries, the United Arab Emirates and South Korea. And we will finish by talking about how Safari on visionOS is getting support for embedded spatial photos and videos. So you don't even need to download them once this update goes live. You'll be able to actually see 3D images and videos just living there inside web pages. And our big discussion at the end will be about Google and Samsung. So Android Authority found some evidence within the Google Play Store app that Google is preparing the Play Store for XR headsets, of which Samsung is expected to be the first.
Yeah, that's a cool lineup here we've got today. I saw that Davin signed up to be a member during the show. Thank you so much for your support. And as well as all of our members, thank you so much to everyone. And we've got a lot of regular viewers out there. I brought this up on the VR Games cast. But Don and I had a really great discussion there about games, getting a bunch of views over there for our Arkham Shadow discussion, as well as the deep stuff. I see Not Suspicious here. They were over there on the games cast as well. I believe those are the makers of Airspace Defender, and we talked a little bit about how similar the Iron Dome looks like to what that game is doing. So very cool discussion yesterday, very interesting overall. And then I also saw Dino saying they're watching us on their ceiling today because they hurt their back. So they're reclined in a Quest 3, watching this on the ceiling as VR intended. So I love that, and sorry that you're going through that. Let's get right into this first subject here. So David, last night I was in my Vision Pro with James out there, one of our viewers, and I got Chrome up and running on my Steam Deck and was able to pull up Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Disney Plus on Chrome, and then share via remote play my Chrome browser to another Apple Vision Pro live in the same instance. We were basically co-watching all of those services. Very, very, very cool to experience that. And I knew it was possible, but you've got to jump through some hoops to get your remote plays working. And the really, really cool thing about it was James was also sharing with me his Steam link over to me via dual sharing. So we were basically doing couch co-op as we've always dreamed here on UploadVR. But there is one company out there that's been planning on co-watching since the very, very beginning. And this particular bit of news looks like it's built for that. So why don't you run this through for us, what Bigscreen is offering?
Sure. So as you mentioned, which is really interesting background, visionOS, Apple's operating system, has really great built-in support for screen sharing. And you're doing it through the Steam Link app, which is connected to your Steam Deck there, but you can also just do that with a Safari window in Apple Vision Pro, right? You can bring up Safari, you're there with a spatial persona alongside you, and you just share the view that you have. And you can do that with a lot of different apps. And even if you both own the content, you can do that in Apple TV, for example. Meanwhile, on Quest, they just recently rolled out YouTube co-watching in home. So you can be there as a meta avatar in your Horizon home, the Quest home space, with someone else and do YouTube co-watching. But it's limited to just that. And Bigscreen has had that for quite a while now. Now, if you have a PC connected to Bigscreen, you can, of course, just share your PC screen. And that's how many people like to use the Bigscreen app, because to be clear, what we're talking about today is the app they've had for years, not their Beyond headset. And so the feature that they've rolled out now is the ability to do this fully standalone via a cloud browser. And that's what the feature is called, Cloud Browser. So with just 2 Quest headsets, or 3 or 4 or 5, however many you want in your session, for $10 a month, or for $2 if you just want a day pass, you get access to a web browser that is running in the cloud on AWS, presumably, and then that's synchronized to everyone else in the session. So you're essentially getting Screenshare standalone on Quest, and instead of the headset having to do the networking of sending that out to everyone else, it's just coming straight from the cloud. Now, there are important limitations to note here, caveats that are major. You can't do this with services that use typical DRM. So that rules out, Netflix and Disney Plus. They do, interestingly, in their trailer for this and marketing, show people using things like Plex and Dropbox. And I don't think Bigscreen is in any way promoting using pirated material, but that's obviously what a lot of people use services like Plex for. So you could just do that with your own Plex server, synchronized to everyone else. The other use case they're pointing out here is, playing online games, for example, where that's synchronized up web-based games. $10 a month is a lot for this functionality. That has to be noted, and that was the biggest response we've seen from people talking about this. At the same time, though, there are people who are power users of the Bigscreen app. They love it, and for them, the ability to go beyond their current built-in functionality of just local videos and YouTube and the predetermined channels without having to connect to a PC is going to be something that they value. So I'm really curious if Bigscreen at any point in the coming months reveals how many people have subscribed to this, or I guess it's not really a subscription. You pay for a 30-day pass and then pay for another one. How many people are using this at least would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I do think of it as a subscription, and I think that's an area we're going to have to watch very carefully. I've been talking with multiple devs out there about the rise of subscriptions or the value of subscriptions. You can move off if you have a subscription option that exists on your own website. You can completely avoid giving a cut of the platform companies to your subscription. And then you've got services like Golf Plus that give you all the courses and really big uptick over there for that service. And just overall, we were talking about it over on Twitter that subscription and age gating services to restrict content to certain segments of the populace. Those are things that happen in the real world on a regular basis. You pay for a membership for your local country club or Netflix or whatever. That's just the way a lot of things work in the real world. Even Costco, right? You go and pay for a subscription service to your grocery store if you really want. So it makes a lot of sense that VR would start seeing adoption towards various subscription services, and getting your browser inside the cloud makes a lot of sense. Of course, a DRM is not going to work for most services and some of the most important services that people would want to share this way. And I'm seeing people in the comments bringing up Bigscreen overall. They're talking about the Bigscreen Beyond. Reminder to everyone out there that I've got the audio strap that I'm trying to assess, but we've got everything else going on. I haven't spent a whole lot of time in that since I've been getting back, but I know people are curious about that product, and we want to get those assessments out really quickly. I saw someone else joking that they've been doing stuff like co-watching in Neos and Resonite for years. Of course, right? This is the cornerstone of VR, is the idea of co-watching. But I have to bring up that it's always, it requires a PC for most of those things, and that's not mass market, right? You're not going to get to hundreds of millions of VR users by requiring them have a PC in order to watch a movie with their friends.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's giant friction involved there in the fact that you're streaming from a PC to multiple headsets, and that doesn't always go well. So the pitch here is just that this is available on standalone. I don't think they expect anyone to use this on PC. I haven't even tested whether this feature exists on PC because, again, Bigscreen already lets you just mirror your regular PC desktop, right? Why would you need it? This is specifically for standalone. It is still a frustrating situation, as we always bring up on this show, that co-watching is such a huge potential use case for VR, but it's not limited by the technology as much as it's limited by the legal side, the content rights. So, yes, officially in Quest Home and in Bigscreen, you can co-watch YouTube, which, to be honest, is probably the biggest use case for co-watching if you're completely standalone and not using a PC. But it would be great to see one of these companies, whether it be Apple or Meta, strike a deal where, just like in real life, if someone comes over to your home, they can watch your Netflix with you by just sitting next to you, or your Disney Plus, without having a subscription, right? The TV doesn't scan you and say, hey, who else in the room doesn't have a Disney Plus subscription? It would be great to see Meta or Apple strike some sort of deal where you can invite someone into your virtual home and use your Netflix subscription for them to watch while they're in your session. It'll happen eventually, probably, maybe, but until then, we're still in this frustrating situation where, even today, even if you do have 2 Netflix subscriptions, you can't do this, right? They're not even at that point yet. And it's just a matter of probably once the user base gets big enough, then it starts to matter to them.
Yep. Yeah, very good summary there. Let's move on to this next subject here, I think, pretty quickly, unless there's any specific comments you want to call out. The thing that I've been playing with lately is everyone knows HDMI link, Quest HDMI link. I've been using that in every possible configuration. And one of the things I bought was a 4x splitter to take one HDMI input, output 4 HDMI inputs, and then convert all the HDMIs back to USB-C power and data in order to route them into 4 different devices. And it's this really magical thing. I've seen this argument happening over on Twitter. Apple just released a Mac Mini, one of their only screenless machine that they sell, and people are looking at it going, making this argument that, well, I've been making this argument that we should have a USB-C powered Mac Micro, a very, very small machine. I've got the Raspberry Pi 400 that's USB-C powered, and it's the same idea where I could technically, I suppose, on the Raspberry Pi 400, get 2 HDMI cables coming out to 2 machines, and if I somehow installed Steam on that and then installed Chrome on Steam, we could have this co-watching experience that I'm discussing. But this dream here is, right, have a keyboard, have a PC inside the keyboard, have 4 HDMIs coming out of it, and then those 4 HDMIs are going to 4 people, and you don't have to have a local area network or any outside service provider providing you that entertainment, and you can bring back LAN parties or even split-screen multiplayer.
Sure. For me, I think the magic of VR co-watching is doing it when you're at a distance, right? Whether you're 50 miles away or 5,000 miles away. If you're in the same room, for me at least, a giant TV or a projector would be the best option. I don't see the need to get four people in the same room and all put a headset on to watch a movie. But I mean, if you want to do that, maybe on a plane or something, it could be interesting. Although you may get some strange looks as you've all these wires going between the seats.
Well, what's cool about the scenario that I was outlining is not everyone has to be in a VR headset. You can take this USB seed HDMI input and put it into an iPad, put it into a computer, put it into whatever display device you've brought to the table, and then you're playing a board game together without the board game being present. And then you switch from the board game to Halo, or you switch from the board game to GoldenEye on Nintendo 64, and the four of you are each playing in your own little quadrant of the screen on your own display device, and it just happens that VR is one of the display devices. But you're absolutely right. I'm talking about a fraction of the geekiest of the geekiest users out there that I just want to prove it's possible, almost as a big middle finger to the people who are trying to keep us from having this experience. Well, let's talk about this next one and then move on to the meta section after this. So this is WebXR in Chromium. Why don't you break down why this is significant?
Yeah. So, well, the Wolvic browser, if you're not aware, is the spiritual successor to Firefox Reality. So a few years ago, I think 2 or so years ago now, don't quote me on that, Mozilla stopped the Firefox Reality project and laid off a bunch of people working on that. And so then this open source group decided to continue it as Wolvic. And for a while, they were using the Gecko engine that Mozilla Firefox uses. But to get the best WebXR performance, recently they started releasing Chromium builds. And with that, they got way better 3D performance, so in VR. And now they've managed to add the WebXR augmented reality module. So to be clear, this is something you can already do in your Quest browser or your Pico browser today. You can go on to a WebXR web app that uses the AR module and do mixed reality in a web browser, right, without downloading any app. So this just allows you to do that in Wolvic. And you might ask, well, why would I want to use Wolvic over the built-in browser then? So there's two reasons, I guess. One is that it's open source. So if that matters to you, you don't need to be doing your web browsing through a Meta product or a Pico product, given that they're both owned by companies that people may have issues with data privacy when they're browsing the web. This is an open source app. You can technically compile it yourself or inspect the source code. The other advantage is that because this has evolved from Firefox Reality, they're able to do Firefox password and other data sync. So if you're using Firefox on your PC or your phone or both, you can have all of that sync up. Because one of the most frustrating parts, of course, of using the Quest browser or the Pico browser is that you have to re-enter all of your passwords and stuff because those browsers don't exist on your other devices. It's a huge, huge issue. It's one of the best things about Apple Vision Pro, if you are an Apple user for iPhone or Mac, is that if you use Safari, all of that's obviously synced up. And so this kind of gives you a way to do that with your Quest browser. There's some other really nice features of Wolvic. You may want to go and try it out if you haven't, especially for Quest Pro users. They actually recently, last month, added eye-tracked navigation. So the gaze and pinch interface that Apple Vision Pro has. Meta never implemented this in the Quest interface. They probably could, right? And the Quest Pro has eye tracking and its hand tracking can see down to even with your hand on your lap. So you can do this, keep your hand on your lap, look around and gaze and pinch. That works in Wolvic with your Quest Pro. There are some other nice little features there, and this is something that they're really rapidly evolving. So just one last note on this is that the version of Wolvic that is on the app stores, Pico Store and Meta's Horizon Store, is still using the old Gecko engine. If you want the Chromium version, you need to sideload it, and you can find the link for that on our article on UploadVR.com.
Yeah, any comments you want to respond to? Because I'm really excited to get into this next section here. I want to say hi to Biggs for tuning in, as well as all of our regular commenters. I see Arlen out there, Onakazi, and also just thank you to all the silent viewers out there, silent listeners. I know we've got a lot of people. It's been actually really gratifying to get a bunch of emails. I reached out to a source yesterday, and just said, hey, can I I'd like to get an interview with the project you're working on. And they were like, I want to let my colleague respond and get back to you, but I just want to say I'm a regular listener of VR Download. And it was cool because there's actually a large number of industry folks, I think, out there that watch us, listen to us, and are part of this community, but they're out there just quietly observing, doing other stuff, doing their work. I like to imagine that our show plays inside the Meta halls, so that the executives of Meta hear our voices, sort of like that scene in Ready Player One. Sometimes with some of the things we discuss here, we would like to talk about the things. Guy Godin's saying he's a silent viewer. No, you're not, Guy. All right, let's keep moving on. I see Alan Carter saying they're lurking, and I think our silent viewers are actually speaking up. So thank you for watching and listening.
Yeah, just one comment I want to bring up here. Where has it gone? Someone was complaining, RM was complaining, that Wolvic takes over your whole immersive space. It does not run as a panel app in Horizon OS when you're in 2D browsing mode. It's a fully immersive app that has its own environments. And so, yes, that is something that they definitely should be hopefully exploring, is bringing it in as a multitasking app so that when you're not in WebXR mode, you can run it alongside others. The one thing I would say, though, is that the Quest home environments are pretty terrible. And in the recent updates to Wolvic, they've actually been adding more environments and better environments. And they're probably better. So if you're just browsing, I don't know if the Quest home space environments are themselves a good moat, but I'm sure they have noted that and they're going to look into that. But yeah, let's move on to the Quest section.
Yeah, so I saw Lewis, or Louis, I'm sorry, I didn't double check the pronunciation of your name, but I think it's Lewis. Actually met up with Lewis earlier this week in a test flight app. They hit me up with a test flight app for a cool application that I showed you, David, where something very similar to this studio. And as we've said in the past, if someone builds everything we need out of this studio, that we get out of this studio, into another app, we would be seriously consider switching to that service. And they have an interesting solution that they're working on over there, Together XR, I believe is what it's called. But we still have some features we really need to have before I think we can switch over to that. But it was a very cool effort and very neat to see that in Apple Vision Pro. Let's move on to this meta section here. So this one has won us some fans out there because of our level-headed assessment, or rather David's level-headed assessment of how Meta is focusing its revenue and its spending to build the future of personal computing that we discuss here every week with this audience. So, David, why don't you break this down for us?
Sure. So every quarter, as do most public companies, Meta has an earnings call where they release their financials. And since late 2020, they have broken out the Reality Labs financials. Reality Labs being the division of Meta that is behind Quest headsets, the Horizon software platform, the technology side of the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and research and development towards AR glasses. They recently showed off Orion as their progress on that. And so what Ian's referring to is that if you look at the reporting of this in wider media, including tech media, you will only ever see this reported as Meta made $4 billion loss in this quarter. Meta's AR VR division keeps making losses. The problem with that analysis is that over 50% of the spending of Meta Reality Labs is on research and development of AR glasses, a product line that has not even launched yet. So people conflate this. At best, they conflate it with Quest. They think that all of the spending that is happening in Reality Labs is being spent on Quest. At worst, they think it's Horizon. The worst reporting you'll see out there from mainstream media is that Meta is spending all of this money on Horizon Worlds, because the reason they think that is that Meta sometimes refers to AR, VR, the whole topic, the whole industry, as metaverse. So people think by metaverse they mean Horizon Worlds, when in fact Mark Zuckerberg commonly uses the phrase to simply mean all of Meta's ventures within AR and VR encapsulated. So in this kind of graph, you can see that they are still spending way more than they're making, but that's not surprising because of that research and development towards AR glasses, which is a Manhattan project level scale project. They are trying to bring a technology out of science fiction and into reality with AR glasses. We said over and over again on this show, just how challenging it is. And I've said, as the analogy I commonly make, it's like trying to build an iPhone in the 1990s. You're going to have to spend tens of billions, and even then, you're barely going to get something together. And that's why on this show, we frequently say we don't think they're going to be compelling products in the AR glasses space until the 2030s, but Meta will probably be one of the first companies there. But let's dig into specifically the revenue, because that's interesting in itself, right? Forget about those costs that include those other things and just look, what are they actually bringing in? And so the reason that we divide this by quarter is that you generally see cyclical effects. For example, in green here, we have Q4 of each year. That's the holiday season. And so that's where they always make the most revenue. So you can see here that on the Quest 3 launch quarter, back in Q4 2023, they had their highest ever when Quest 3 launched, where enthusiasts and some new users alike bought in on Quest 3. Now, the first thing we need to really make clear here is that this new data, quarter 3 2024, does not include Quest 3S. Quarter 3, this data ended on September 30th, 2 weeks before Quest 3S launch. And thus, we will not see that data until the next quarter, quarter 4, for which we will have data on February 1st. But specifically on this data, what you can see is that for the third quarter in a row in this year, and the fourth quarter in a row overall, the revenue this year for the quarter was higher than last year. So they are on a rebound from the downturn that they had in 2023, when you had Quest 4 on its fourth calendar year and third literal year on the market. So that was an old product that needed to be replaced. And Quest Pro had failed. We all know this. We've gone over on this show many times. Quest Pro was a commercial market failure. It did not sell well. And then they only just kind of turned that around with Quest 3, where it sold a lot. And you see that with Quest 3, they were able to change the fortune of Reality Labs, where these first 3 quarters had gone down to historic lows. This is not a particularly interesting quarter, again, because this is just before the launch of Quest 3S. The really interesting data here will be that fourth quarter data that, as I said, we expect to get on February 1st. That will give us an indication of Quest 3S success. And from that, we will know what kind of era is Meta Reality Labs about to enter. Is this going to be a new phase of new highs and growth, or are they still going to be trailing the Quest 2 era that we see here? One last thing, it's really interesting to note that Quest 2's biggest quarter was not its launch quarter. It was actually the holiday season after launch, as you can see here. That was Quest 2's biggest, where most areas were actually out of lockdowns and out of home activity was mostly back to normal. There's a big misconception that it was this quarter, that one of the pandemic quarters, that Quest 2 was at its peak. And it's actually not true. Right here, you can see that's not true.
So a couple bits of context to add to this. I want to talk about the bet that we've got going with our audience. Is it with Blair out there, one of our most critical viewers? I don't know. The always taking the opposite side of many arguments out there. So I want to talk about that in a second, but I want to give a little bit of context for what Guy Godin is saying here. He's saying, perhaps, David, but if Meta wasn't able to make VR profitable after 10 years, it doesn't look good for AR. So over at MetaConnect, we didn't get to see Orion ourselves, but I did go into the room where Orion was demoed, and I went face to face with the CTO of Meta, Andrew Bosworth sees me face to face, and I just started trying to start up a conversation, get a couple questions in with him. And he pointed out that he believed that VR would be adopted much like the personal computer, very slow ramp up over a very long period of time, whereas AR, they believe, would be adopted quite suddenly, hitting an iPhone moment where it's just suddenly hits a point where the operating system, the user experience, whatever it is, accelerates that market into just it's everywhere very, very quickly. That's their theory. That's their entire company is structured very much around this thesis. And everything we're seeing in these numbers is structured a little bit around this thesis. The thing I think I threw at you, David, way back in the day, and you shut me down very quickly on this podcast for throwing out this idea was, did Meta lose VR? And you laughed openly very quickly because I totally, like, these numbers don't lie, right? These numbers are real revenue figures for Meta, representative of what they're doing in VR. But we're going to get into some of these things later on the show here. But this is the last time that Meta will very much be in a market by itself in standalone VR. We have every indication that Android XR is right around the corner. We have Apple going to try to lower the price of its VR headsets to try to bring the price point down significantly. You've got Pico trying to be strong and do what it couldn't do before with its headsets. And then you've got a whole bunch of other potential additions onto this space that are going to cause competition for Meta, not the least of which is the Valve headset everyone is dreaming about left and right. I see you brought up this chart. Let's talk about it, David. What do you got here?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the PC analogy, and that Guy Godin in our comments said, after 10 years, well, 10 years, if you talk about a completely new technology category, actually isn't a long time. And if you look at adoption curves in history, one of my hobby and fascination is looking at the history of technology, not just from a technological perspective, but from an adoption and consumer sentiment perspective. You often see this S curve, where in the initial years, you get what is reasonable growth, but still nowhere near mainstream. And then you get this kind of gradually and then suddenly effect, where you see in the 90s for personal computers, for example, with Windows 95 and with the iMac and with the internet, you see this inflection point. And if you'd gone back to these periods right here in the late 80s, early 80s, even early 90s, you would see the same kind of criticisms. And you can go and read magazines and watch interviews and watch debates where people make these exact same criticisms of, this is a silly niche. This is a niche technology. It's ridiculous to think that there's going to be a PC in every home. It's ridiculous to think that there's a bigger market than there is today. And you see the exact same trends over and over again. So this is a really, really long-term project, VR and AR. And 10 years is actually just the beginning. Even we're talking about AR glasses being early and not even arriving yet, but even VR and mixed reality is still in its earliest days. We're still talking about the first wave of mixed reality headsets with Vision Pro and Quest 3 and Quest 3S. VR still has so far to go in all of the key technological aspects and dimensions and content. We are still, believe it or not, as hard as it is to believe in 2024, in the early days of this. And Mark Zuckerberg has been saying for 5 or 6 years now to investors on earnings calls, this is an investment in a long-term future that we don't expect to be financially meaningful until the 2030s. He's not coming out to investors and saying, next year when this launches, this is all going to be big. He's been saying for a long time now, this is something we expect to have returns in the 2030s. We're still in the early days.
So let's go back to the other chart, the chart that we've got a bet going with Anti-Cleric out there, and talk about these two platforms and how they differ from one another. So a couple things that I think our viewers will have in mind here that not a lot of other places are going to tease apart is VR and AR are very, very different platforms. The software is going to be different. The power requirements are different. The field of view is going to be completely different on what you can see and how much of your scene can actually be augmented with a pair of glasses versus a big headset that really augments everything you see. What I'm going to argue, or my thesis personally on this, is that AR is Meta's biggest opportunity. That they've been investing in it for so long and trying to build, as David jokes, growing crystals in their basement. That's their opportunity to actually go and build up production lines and consumer supplies that nobody else can touch, right? If you go rewind the tape and go back to 2014, Mark Zuckerberg walked into a room that had a Valve demo in it that helped convince him to go and buy Oculus. So what he saw at Oculus's headquarters was Valve's technology that they had lent to Oculus to co-work on this project together. This whole idea that VR is going to happen. So what I'm getting at with that is David is so key in pointing out that more than 50% of the research that is in these charts is going towards that future platform that Meta needs to secure production lines and its little moat of protection for its revenues. And I'm arguing overall that its moat is much weaker when you think about VR headsets, that it doesn't have a defensible moat in VR as much as it could have in AR. And then I'm going to flip it around on the audience there and say, do you need AR glasses or do you need wide field of view VR headsets that provide you focus anytime you need it? So, David, why don't you get into some of that? I covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, sure. I think when it comes to the Valve demo, the Valve room, the Zuckerberg demo that inspired him to acquire Oculus, it's important to note that there is a kind of ship of Theseus effect going on here, is what do you call Valve and what do you call Oculus? Because one of the first things that happened after that acquisition is that they went and acquired a bunch of the people who built that room at Valve and brought them over to Oculus, right? So right after that acquisition, they get 5 or 6 of the key people behind there. And in fact, the majority of the key people behind that room, including Michael Abrash, who we see in this image today, Meta's chief scientist, who was, Valve's kind of, at least publicly, frontman for VR in that era. But yeah, I think when it comes to Meta's moat in this space, you're right to say that they're going to have a challenge. We'll talk later on the show about Google and Samsung, but right now their mode is mostly in fully immersive content, in VR gaming, right? They have, acquired some of these studios. They've got Beat Saber, they've got Population 1, they've got Batman Arkham, they've got Asgard's Wrath 2, and their other exclusives. And that's we saw what happened when Pico tried to go against that with a much smaller investment. They decided this is just something we simply cannot compete with at any reasonable level. So then they pivot over to something that Meta doesn't really have any moat on, which is this spatial computing use case, the virtual 2D screens and such in Pico 4 Ultra, the use case that Apple Vision Pro has really pushed. And in that space, it's ironic that the moat comes from the existing platforms, from having, in Apple's case, the App Store that has a bunch of the top iPad apps available in Vision Pro with all of your settings and data syncing over from your iPhone and Mac. And then, as we'll talk about later in the show, and we'll probably push that discussion out to then, to be frank, Google is going to be doing the same thing with the Play Store in Android XR. And that's where it gets tricky for Meta, because what is its mode at that point? Arguably, it's the fact that on a hardware level, they're doing two things that neither of those companies can do. They're doing first-party hardware sold at cost. Apple is doing first-party hardware, but it's sold with a profit. And Google and Samsung's case, Samsung is going to want to make a hardware profit, and Google is going to want to make a software profit. So there's an inherent tension there in how they price that headset. But we'll talk about that near the end of the show.
Yeah, so let's talk about that bet on that chart real quick. Can you recap that? I was trying to remember exactly what we had bet, Blair, on specifically regarding that chart, because I saw people referencing it on Twitter and trying to remember what exactly we said. What is our expectation here?
So I believe our expectation is that Q4 of 2024, this next quarter that we see, will be a record quarter. You can see the quarter 4 results in the green bars here. We think that this holiday season, with Quest 3 and Quest 3S out there, as well as, we have Batman Arkham Shadow now. I think Metro is launching in a few days. Don't quote me on that. I'm not the games person. And then we have some other big titles arriving. We think that when you combine that all in with parents buying their teens these headsets for Christmas, and people, buying it as the days get darker and colder and they want to do more things inside, we think this will be the record quarter. But we'll have to see. We'll see what happens when we get that data on February 1st, we expect.
Yep, that is exactly what I was thinking. I want to hit the like button, please, out there, to bring in some more people, teach the algorithm that this is good information and good discussion that you're not going to get elsewhere.
Ryan B pointing out that Behemoth is launching on December 5th, so we have it coming as well. There's some really, this is not the game show, but this is arguably going to be the best season for VR gaming yet, right? again, not my area of expertise, but you have Batman that just launched, then we're going to have Metro, then we're going to have Behemoth, and then Alien as well. I don't know its launch date. Is it
Well,
coming
yeah,
soon?
Alien is right at the end of December, right before
Okay.
Christmas. But the thing I raised on the Gamescast, go watch that, was I'm worried about a delay there on at least some of the platforms. Like they didn't show it on PSVR 2. They didn't even show it on Quest standalone. They showed it on a PC plugged in to Quest, and that's not great to see in October right before release. So I would love to see it on PSVR 2. I would love to see it on Quest as soon as possible to get a better feel for whether it's going to whether those pre-order buyers are actually going to get the game this year. But Behemoth is going to anchor the season, I think. There's also, of course, Arkham Shadow, I think, on its own is going to, right, we talked about on Gamescast, $300, you go to a Walmart or one of these roadshow locations where they're showing off Arkham Shadow in physical locations. You come out of the headset and they say, yeah, you can get that game and the headset for $300, and that's all you need. You can go play. You can go become Batman. It's a very, very potent offer uh, to sell a bunch of headsets, and we have yet to see that. The thing that I'm seeing brought up by a couple commenters, a couple of our audience members, who are developers, including Guy Godin, including Not Suspicious. I'm also hearing it echoed in my DMs as well as publicly on Twitter. The word that there's several subjects here that people are concerned about and things that could be conflating. It's one of the reasons it's been hard to report this and get out. But the word that I'm hearing again and again and again is visibility. Uh, People, the devs out there, are deeply concerned that their paid products that they've spent years or sometimes only months developing aren't visible enough compared to Horizon Worlds content and compared to free to play content or even App Lab content that isn't quite as finished as some of their products that they've prepared for years. So these devs all like they've been trained here to think of Christmas time. This period from November 1st to December 25th is the Super Bowl for VR devs. It is the only period of the year that truly matters ultimately because of how many eyeballs are going to be put inside VR headsets during this month and a half period. And if their products are not visible to buyers because something else is being shown before them in front of their search results, that is literally taking money out of their pockets and putting it into like just putting it into time into Meta's pocket, right? Like it's taking money out of one hand and putting it into somebody else's. And the word I keep hearing out there is visibility. So we're going to have to get that article on visibility out very soon because it's taken me a little time to sort this out. David, do you have anything else to add there before we move on?
Yeah, I think just want to reiterate, we are working on trying to get a story out there. But as you say, it is a very complex one because there are multiple factors happening at the same time here. You had the shift from the MetaQuest store with its content curation to the Horizon store, which is, for better and for worse, more open. And then simultaneously, you have this push from Meta of Horizon Worlds content versus apps. So these are conflating factors. You also have the fact that Quest 3S is then a cheaper headset. So people who are buying it by definition are going to have less available money to buy things. We do note that Meta's head of VR and AR, Meta's head of VR, Mark Rabkin, did make a statement on social media a few days ago claiming that the per user spend has not gone down, suggesting that what could be happening here is that the spend is then being distributed down to some of these apps that have come in the phase of opening up the store, right? So you have these lower end apps that aren't from the big studios. We talked about this actually even before the Horizon store launched with its new open policy. We said one thing you're going to see here is that there is going to be less visibility for the bigger studios that are on the store already and less spend because sometimes you're going to get some very price sensitive consumers that come in and say, instead of buying the $30 version of this, I'm going to buy the $3 ripoff. And that's unfortunate in some ways, but that is a market dynamic we see throughout pretty much every other form of entertainment as well.
Yeah, I think the last context there to add before we move on is if you think about the layers between everyday devs and buyers, it's Meta has multiple layers that they can use to get some devs some money, but also just uh like Quest Plus subscription. That's what I'm getting at there. The Quest Plus subscription is exactly what I was saying earlier about subscription models. That's a big win for Meta and the companies, the devs that put their games inside of the Quest Plus subscription. Assume they have deals in place with Meta to actually reap some rewards from that placement. And you add Quest Plus on top of Horizon Worlds, on top of open content where any Gorilla Tag clone can release a Gorilla Tag clone very, very quickly, and you have the visibility issue that we're discussing. But that doesn't mean there aren't pockets of money being made. Mark Rabb can comment. I will note, I appreciate David giving that context. It was very carefully worded. Like he said, generally, I think was a qualifier word when he talked about the per user spend, and that made me a little iffy on that comment, but it was very good for you to bring that up, David.
Yeah, I think the Quest Plus thing is another important one. Again, we're going to get into this in proper reporting. We're looking into this. We're trying to get the facts here. We don't just want to be haphazard. But it is very important to note that Quest 3S comes with 3 free months of Quest Plus. And Quest Plus used to be just you can redeem 2 games every month. But then recently, a few months ago, they changed it quite dramatically to add a games catalog to make it more like Xbox Game Pass, right? So you have some pretty great games on the games catalog now. Just this month for November, they are adding Cubism and Space Pirate Trainer, for example, to this catalog. So you get some really key content, and that could really affect user spending, right? Because if you have 3 months of getting some of this high quality best of Quest content for free, you may be less likely to then want to put into bigger purchases. But again, we're digging into this story in more detail.
I like Davin's context here, suggesting that you want store visibility, pay for it with discounts and sales. We are seeing a lot of devs do that, and we are seeing some, we're going to have to check in with the devs on their success levels, but I have seen that trend, as well as many others have seen that trend of just 85% off or 84% off of the base price for a game in a very short span of time, boosting all those numbers, but also that's going to be a driving force of taking money out of the ecosystem over time, right? That's going to be the driving force towards pricing all of your apps at $2.99 and $3.99 before a few years later when all apps are supposed to be free, which is exactly what we saw on the Apple App Store. Let's move to this next subject, and I will try to figure out why my cat is whining at me like this.
The cat is always interrupting. I wonder when we're going to get cat tracking in VR. I guess people segmentation will eventually turn into pet segmentation as well. So the next meta topic we're going to talk about is something that we will just very briefly discuss, which is that the Horizon Hyperscape demo of photorealistic scenes is now available outside the US. So if you were interested in this, but you were outside the US and you didn't want to use a VPN, this is something that you can now go and download for free on the Horizon store. If you don't know what on earth we're even talking about, this is a demo that Meta released at Connect last month that is of 6 photorealistic scenes. So it's standalone on Quest. You put your headset on and you are in a scanned environment that is fairly photorealistic, though a little bit low resolution. It's not super duper sharp. I should say technically not standalone. You are running it standalone without a PC from your perspective, but Meta is actually using its long in development Avalanche VR streaming, cloud streaming technology to make this possible. So the rendering is happening in the cloud and being streamed as a view to your headset. From your perspective, though, as long as you have a fast internet connection, you're not going to notice that. You're just going to see that you're in a scene like this. And so what's really interesting about this is that the Connect, they indicated that their intention for this in the long term is to allow you to scan your own scene. This is something that other companies have been doing. Vario with their Vario Reality that you can sign up and try. They are also trialing this. And so, today this is called Meta Horizon Hyperscape Demo, the app on the store. Eventually, the idea will probably be that you can pull out the Meta Horizon app on your smartphone, walk around a room or other scene that you want to scan for 5 or 10 minutes. All that footage gets sent up to Meta's servers. You wait 3, 6, 12 hours, however many hours, and then you get a notification on your phone. Your Hyperscape is ready to view. Put on your Quest headset, and you then have that environment. And then the really cool part is that you can, hopefully they haven't announced this, but this is generally the idea, invite a friend over and they'll appear as an avatar with you in this space. So you can imagine the use cases for this in terms of being able to spin up, for example, showing people architectural demos, of showing people designs of interior design, real estate, other things like that in the long term. And this is obviously, again, powered by Gaussian splatting. People in the comments are asking which countries this is available in. We were made aware that it was in the UK, and I tested and found that. Some people in some European countries say it works for them, some don't. Just go on to your Meta Horizon app or your Quest headset and the store and search for Hyperscape and try it out and see if it works for you. Again, you need a fast internet connection for this to work.
Yeah, I'm excited to get on to the next subject here because I think it's going to inspire a lot of conversation, but a lot of people out there very excited for Hyperscape. I do want to mention my cat here. My cat's right here. I'm petting him, and I very desperately want cat tracking in VR. And I noticed this week in Vision Pro. I know it's been there for a long time, but myself and a couple other people were in the Vision Pro persona chat. So very similar to what David and I are doing right now, but we're represented as avatars that look very realistic. So they look very much like my actual self. When I make facial expressions, they actually match my real facial expressions. But what Apple has done in their persona chat, when you pull up Spatial personas, is there's a shadow on the floor underneath this floating person, and it follows the person as they're going around. And so without even looking at the person, you see a little shimmering, like a purple, pink, bluish thing down on the floor underneath where the person is. And so it's this little subtle effect that makes you realize where the person is in your room, even though you don't actually share the physical room with one another. It's a powerful thing. And it's one of the first times I've actually seen devs or a platform follow through on this very, very difficult problem, which is how do you differentiate someone that is physically in your room from someone who is digitally distant into your room? Like, do you show them as a ghost? Do you show them as a floating specter? Do you only show it if the person is looking at you or comes into your space? Do you show it all the time? It's a hard software problem, but it was really, really cool to see Apple do this. I want that for cats. I want to be able to show you my cat in the room. I'm convinced that it will be a powerful amplifier. I saw that in our comments.
Yeah, I mean, Vision Pro already has person breakthrough, right? Where if, as you say, if another human being walks into your space, if you have it set in the settings, even if you're in VR in Vision Pro, you will see them cut out appearing in front of you. They kind of appear like a ghostly figure with sort of translucency. There's no reason they couldn't also train that. I assume it's just a computer vision model for pets as well. I imagine it'll probably happen at some point. And I wonder if we'll see that arrive on Quest, actually, in Quest 3 and 3S lifespan, just like we saw a bunch of computer vision features added to Quest 1 and Quest 2 over their lifespan. Famously, of course, on Quest 1, hand tracking, that headset launched without it completely. And then we got to an era where it has a hand tracking. So we could see that come on Quest as well. We have a comment here from Bringhurst VR on Hyperscape asking whether this would work for those who don't have a LiDAR. So if you don't have an iPhone Pro that has a LiDAR, this Gaussian splatting technique is not photogrammetry, and it's not this hardware intensive scan. The idea behind this is that you can just use any single RGB camera, and all of the magic here is happening in the neural network. We really are in an era where you can do amazing things with neural networks and some pretty sparse input data, some photographs of the room you're in, and it can create this three-dimensional representation. That is the magic of Gaussian splatting. As we've said before in this show, what LLMs did to chatbots, Gaussian splatting seems to be doing to volumetric photorealistic representation of real-world scenes and objects in VR. And we expect to see some really interesting stuff from Gaussian splatting over the next year or two in VR. So really a technology to pay attention to in Horizon Hyperscape and in Gracia, which we covered on last week's show. And of course, there are others working on this too.
Yeah, I appreciate the commenters responding to their love of cats, and they want cat computer vision as much as possible, or cat track and cat collars to bring their cat into a space like VR chat would be pretty hysterical if you put the tracker on the collar and now the cat is running around VR chat would be pretty amazing. I haven't seen anyone actually go that far. I assume someone has done it. But let's see. I also liked A Cleveru's comment earlier. They had mentioned that they got one of their favorite apps on one of those crazy discounts, and they felt so bad. They wished that the developer had posted their Venmo just so that they could send a few more dollars directly to the developer after getting it on discount like that. I appreciate that context. Guy Godin saying cat capture API. Let's move on to this next subject, I think, because we got to get out of here and relax.
Well, the last thing I was going to say on cat tracking is that when Meta releases that pass-through API next year, technically developers can run a custom computer vision model to detect your cat, right? That should be possible if there's enough NPU overhead. But as you say, we're both sick here. I can feel myself getting sicker by the minute, funny enough. Yep. So let's move on to the next topic, which is Steam Link. So the Steam Link app for Quest, it's a free app that Valve released back in December that lets you, with very few clicks, get straight into streaming Steam VR in your headset. So it turns your Quest into a wireless PC VR headset in the same way that Airlink and Virtual Desktop do, except there are fewer steps for this from going straight from your headset into Steam VR, right? If you have this pinned to your bar, for example, you click the Steam Link app, you click your PC, and boom, within a few seconds, you're inside Steam Link or Steam VR, you're inside. And this update this week has been a long time in the testing. They've been testing this on the beta channel of Steam Link and Steam VR for months, and now it is released. So it's hand tracking support. We're using optical hand tracking here right now, so we have individual finger tracking. Now, if you launch this up, you'll go into Steam VR and you can move your hand around and pinch in Steam VR to navigate the interface. You won't see a hand representation there in the default Steam VR dashboard. You can in Steam VR Home. And this also passes through to PC VR applications. It forwards the hand tracking data via both OpenXR and Steam VR input for their skeletal hand tracking there. So one thing you could do here, for example, and we showed this in our article as a demo, is you can launch up Half-Life Alyx and see your hands represented there without even holding controllers. You can also do that in games like The Lab that also use the Steam VR skeletal input. The thing is, that's not really a practical way to play those games because these games are designed around controllers. You can use the binding system to map gestures and stuff to different controller buttons and sticks, but it's a novelty. For those games, you really want to still use controllers. What this is useful for is for titles that have specifically added support for hand tracking or are designed around hand input without buttons and sticks. So one of those games that recently released is Maestro, and we highly reviewed it on Quest. It's a rhythm game that uses hand tracking, and it's based in classical music. And they also have a version on Steam. So you can get that version on Steam, connect with Steam Link, and it just works, right? Your hand tracking's there. For menu interfaces, you're physically pushing buttons. The other thing it works for is VR Chat. VR Chat has support for hand tracking on Quest standalone, and it has support for hand tracking on PC. And again, you can, for free, get the Steam Link app on your Quest, just have your gaming PC on with Steam open and go straight into the PC version of VR Chat with hand tracking. And they have designed their menu interface and locomotion system to work around hand tracking. So we expect that this may lead to an increase in adoption of hand tracking for developers. This is something, as I'm sure I'll check the chat, Guy Godin has probably pointed out if he hasn't already. But Virtual Desktop can do this through its VDXR thing. So you now have Steam Link and Virtual Desktop forwarding OpenXR hand tracking for developers to use if they want, or they can use the Steam VR input. So we expect that this may get more PC apps to use hand tracking. The other thing is this update also forwards eye tracking from Quest Pro. So if you are a PC VR developer, you can now build apps that use eye tracking and have people connect through this or Virtual Desktop and use it, or hand tracking. So we expect to see, just like Maestro, more PC VR apps using hand and eye tracking.
Yeah, I'm I was trying not to lead us down too many sidetracks because I figured this would be a big subject for us to discuss. Obviously, people are out there having, drinking vast amounts of copium, waiting for the Deckard, the next Valve headset to launch, waiting in the wings. You've got an entire platform of devs that can't transition their content from controller tracking to hand tracking without platform level support like this directly in the ecosystem. Look at this icon. Look at this. This is so many years in the waiting of in the making of waiting for this to arrive, and to see that this beautiful thing in the icons is a very, very big day. Maestro, you can go read Don Hopper's review of Maestro. He broke it down beautifully, right? There are people that hate rhythm games, that just don't feel anything for rhythm games. And then you go play this and see how different it is. It's not about haptic feedback. It's about embodying this conductor experience. And part of the reason that works is because of this magnificent use of hand tracking and having that supported in Steam VR games out of the box, right? That's a big deal. David, what about my Joy-Cons?
What about your Joy-Cons?
Can I use my Joy-Cons with hand tracking, and how far away is that? Can I use my Joy-Cons with a Quest and get full Half-Life Alyx input out of that on a Quest?
You should be able to, in the same way that you did with Vision Pro. I don't think, not on the... I haven't tested this, to be clear. I'm sure this is something that you will test. I'm surprised you haven't tested already. I'm surprised you haven't come in and told us all about how you use your Joy-Cons with this. And the commenters are going to be getting horrendously drunk from all the Joy-Con references for the UploadVR drinking game. But I think you could do this. But again, these games are not designed for that. You have touch controllers in the box. There was this big debate: would Quest 3S have a controller-free SKU, or would it come with controllers? You've got these pretty compact Touch Plus controllers with great haptics and pretty much perfect within the field of view 6-DoF tracking. Just pick them up and use them if you want to play one of these games, right?
No, I refuse. I appreciate the commenters keying in on David. What about your Joy-Cons? I love it. Fantastic response there, David. And yeah, there are people going to clip that out and put it on everywhere. That's funny. All right. So, yeah, I will be testing out my Joy-Cons very soon with Half-Life Alyx on Quest, because if I get those Joy-Cons working in Quest and I get those Joy-Cons working in Apple Vision Pro using an open source streaming solution, it's going to prove a very powerful point about how I think motion controllers need to evolve a little bit beyond what we have today with all the built-in tracking systems. But let's move on to our last subject here in a minute.
Yeah, one last thing I want to point out. I see some people in the comments saying that they've only tried AirLink and not Steam Link, or Virtual Desktop and not Steam Link. I would recommend giving Steam Link a try, especially if you just tried it at launch. Valve, again, we talk about this idea of Valve not being involved in VR. Well, the thing they're updating more than anything is the Steam Link app for Quest. Again, it's this really strange scenario where a lot of people still have this mindset of Meta and Valve being competitors. And I guess in some sense they are, in some vague sense, but in a bigger sense, they are working together, right? This is a big industry partnership. The majority of headsets connecting to Steam VR are Meta headsets. And so Valve made this app that at launch, it was pretty buggy, right? There were stability issues, but they have been cranking out updates every few months to get this thing to work better, higher quality, better performance. They've been squashing bugs left, right, and center, and it hasn't even been out for a year yet. I still prefer Virtual Desktop overall as a power user, but especially if you don't want to spend any money at all, right? This is better than AirLink. I don't understand people who are still using the built-in AirLink when Steam Link exists. Steam Link is better overall, like in my experience these days. And I did, try this out with Quest 3S, with this update, with other things. I tried to compare, does hand tracking work with which solution and which way? Steam Link's really good these days. And with all of these features you get being added and all of the additions, this is what I recommend as your free solution if you want a free solution to connect to PC VR.
Yeah, we'll see. We're on the cusp of a Switch 2 supposedly being announced. The next generation of consoles there from Nintendo. We've seen some patents floating out there into the ether. We've seen Meta slowly strip out the tracking ring out of their controllers so that it's this low profile device. Yeah, it's a running joke here that I'm going to bring up Joy-Cons at all the awkward positions when no one wants to hear about it. But I contend I will be vindicated in the long run that they are a good solution for VR input over the long term. Let's move on here. Are there any comments you want to respond to before we talk about this last meta subject?
Yeah, one last thing I probably should note. I think, who was this that brought up the foveated encoding? Mr. Mycelium saying that Steam Link's foveated encoding looks bad on Quest 3 due to the pancake lenses. So that's where the compression is prioritized in the center of the lens and less in the peripheral of the lens. And all of the streaming applications do this. Steam Links can be more aggressive, especially on AMD GPUs. The one caveat I would make is that Steam Link is pretty bad on AMD GPUs. So if you do have one of those, don't use it. But if you have an NVIDIA one, I don't find the foveated coding to be really that bad anymore. George Jorgensen in the comment making an interesting suggestion that Meta should just deprecate AirLink and have Steam Link as the official solution. That's an interesting idea. The problem is that the main usage for AirLink and Link from Meta's perspective is actually for developers. If you're building a Quest app in Unity or in Unreal, instead of having to compile it to the headset each time, what developers are told to do and what many do is just run it directly in the editor, and then across Link, it is shown immediately on the Quest headset. So that's actually the reason that Meta is going to keep supporting it and not discontinuing it. But you could imagine AirLink becoming a developer-only feature at some point and being built into the Quest Developer Hub. And then you could actually imagine Meta just saying, on the consumer side, we don't want to put the resource spend into making sure this is always the best solution, so go and use Steam Link. But I would note that they did promote it when it came out, right? Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth tweeted on the day saying this is a great way to play PC VR games on your Quest.
A ship of Theseus type thing. We had Amanda Watson actually write an article for us after they left Meta. So if you go search Amanda Watson UploadVR, you'll see a very cool article written by her about a very cool story to see from early on in the ecosystem. I highly recommend going and checking that out. But that was the creator, one of the core people for the AirLink solution, who's long gone from the original product that they worked on. And right, if these products don't get people that really believe in what they're working on, they can sometimes languish in development hell for a little while. Any comments here? I liked the people are looking for our Halloween outfits. I thought about leaving the studio and coming back in my Stranger Things outfit, but I'm not going to do that right now. And I also saw someone saying that the AirLink only works with the Scene API. Is that right, David?
Yeah, if you're, again, the real use case for Meta for AirLink and Link is for development. So if you want to build a mixed reality app on Quest and you don't want to compile to the headset, yes, over Link and AirLink from the editor of Unity, for example, you can access that scene mesh and then just keep doing rapid iteration. So again, that's why we don't think Meta would actually ever deprecate AirLink or Link, but it's entirely conceivable that they could move it to be one day a developer-only feature.
All right. We've got our last subject here that we need to get through on the Meta section. Then we've got an Apple section, and then we're going to close out this show on Google. So we're at the hour and 10-minute mark. I think that puts us on pace for 2 hours, unfortunately, for the show. I saw some people expecting us to go 2 more hours. I refuse. David refuses. He will not have that today. Let's go through this Meta subject here.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm muting my mic to not sniffle on microphone, so I don't know if we're going to be going for a very long show today. Let me just see if I can bring up the statistics here onto the screen so that you're not just having to listen to me about what these stats are. But the news here is that Meta, a few months ago, without announcing it, silently increased the maximum GPU clock speed of Quest 3. And we've confirmed that this increase also carried through to Quest 3S. So from this chart you should see on screen, apologies to the listeners that aren't in a visual format right now, I'll explain it out loud for you. You see that before this change, the maximum GPU frequency for Quest 3 was 545 megahertz in the default mode, or 599 in the favor GPU mode. And now the maximum when thermals allow, and we'll discuss that soon, is 599 megahertz in default mode and 640 megahertz in favor GPU mode. If you're not familiar with the favor GPU mode, this is something that developers can choose to enable, where they trade off roughly 16% of the maximum CPU clock speed to get extra GPU power. So if you are a Quest app that is GPU bound, you're straining the GPU more than the CPU, you're finding you're running into the limit of that, you can trade off that CPU and now get all the way up to 640 megahertz GPU clock speed. This caveat of when thermals allow is important, though. This will only be applied when the headset is not running too hot, and when it is running too hot, the system will bring down these clocks to what they were before. So you may wonder then, would that then lead to frame drops and noticeable performance issues? No, and here's why. To access the highest GPU frequencies on a Quest 3 or 3S, a developer has to be using dynamic resolution. And this is exactly the reason why. Dynamic resolution will, when thermals allow, bring up the resolution and the clock speed to these maximums. And when the thermals don't allow, when the headset's getting too hot, will bring down both the resolution and the GPU clock speed, so that from the user's perspective, they're not getting less performance, they're just getting less resolution. That said, this should be possible for the vast majority of the time. Red Matter 2 was able to use this from day one a few months ago, because they already use dynamic resolution with a very high maximum. And they say that they were able to get these higher GPU clock speeds for 85% of the time in their testing. So for 15% of the time, the headset got too hot and dropped down to here, but for 85% of the time, they got it up to here. So this continues a trend of Meta increasing the performance of their headsets in post-launch firmware updates. This actually happened twice for both Quest 2 and Quest Pro throughout their lifetime. So over time, without buying a new headset or spending any money, the headset that people had in their home got higher performance, and developers use that to typically just boost the resolution up a little bit, especially since they require dynamic resolution to get this in the first place.
I guess I'm curious, in our comments out there, how many of you use an external battery? Sometimes, always, never. Speak up out there from wherever you are in the world. And I still love seeing which countries everyone's tuning in from. I saw Sweden out there today, and I know we've got people spread out across VR. I think our viewer base is increasing inside VR, keeping us on in the background as they go through various places. The big question I'm seeing in the comments is asking about battery life and how this relates to battery life. That's why I wanted to hear from the people and hear what kind of batteries they're using.
Sure. So it's important to note that Horizon OS is always dynamically adjusting the CPU and GPU clock speed to give apps the performance they need without wasting battery when they don't need it. So the only time that apps will ever be getting this clock speed is when they are pushing up against maximum GPU utilization and needing it. So unless your app is literally pushing the absolute limits of Quest and delivering, incredible graphics that in all scenes are always rendering a bunch of stuff and effects and post-processing, for example, you're not actually going to be sitting at this clock speed all the time. It really is more of better to think of it as like a temporary boost that the system can now give to apps when they need it. So you get into a very dense area where there's a bunch of enemies and explosions and effects, or a really large area where you're rendering a lot of stuff at once. Your headset's going to, instead of where it would have done before this, either bring down the resolution a bit, or even in the worst case just start dropping frames. It's going to be able to maintain the same resolution you had in those smaller areas where less stuff is going on. So you don't think of it as this percentage increase in battery usage all the time, but just in those scenes. And of course, developers can decide to use a smaller maximum resolution, right? With dynamic resolution, how it works is the developer sets the range, the minimum and maximum. So if they want to get to make their app use less battery and last for longer, but obviously have lower resolution, they can just bring down that maximum. Red Matter 2 is a great example of an app that has a really high upper maximum. So if you go in to Red Matter 2 after this firmware update a few months ago, it's even sharper than it was at launch in many scenes. It really is a remarkable showcase of what's possible on standalone VR. And if you are someone who hasn't bought Red Matter 2 yet, and you want to go in and see what's really possible if you push Quest 3 and Quest 3S to its limits, that's the title you should go and check out.
Yeah, so let's move on to this next subject after David looks at the comments here and see if there's anything he wants to respond to. I want to just call out all the comments responding to the battery question. So a lot of people calling out their brands, Kiwi and Bobo. I saw only one person say that they never use a battery. I'm seeing most people saying they're almost always using a battery. I came in here and I was at 5% or even had a dead battery. I put an Anker Prime battery pack in my pocket. My cat is currently trying to chew on the cord off and on. And if you see me scratching my nose through this episode, it's partially because I'm sick, partially because the cat hair is inside the headset and it's driving me insane. But yes, I'm almost always using a battery pack to get me through VR. And you've got to get those high output packs in order to really get your battery going up through your session in Quest.
I'm using the Kiwi Elite battery strap. It's not the Halo strap. It's just, the Elite strap style. It's their competitor to Meta's Elite strap with battery. And I'm currently on 100% of my Quest 3S internal battery. So I haven't depleted the Kiwi one yet. So I'm completely fine at this point. Last week, you may have noticed, because I've only had the Quest 3S quite recently, I was still using a different strap. So I had to pull out a power cable in the middle, but I'm not going to have any battery issues this episode.
Well, Jake Green's saying 90% of normal users probably don't use an external battery or upgraded head strap. The thing I love, but the thing I love about that is those are also users that frequently get to their headsets and find it's dead, and it goes back into the trash heap, goes back into the closet because the headset wasn't ready to go with them. I loved talking to the two twins earlier this year to play that golf game. I'm not going to give you any reasons to drink more out there on this drinking game. We don't encourage it. But the two twins each had super long USB-C cords to run from the power outlet to their headset, just because they are those advanced. They're going to go and play a game for hours on end, and they never want to be ripped away from their family because of a battery problem. And I think that speaks overall to some of the winning that's going on of the people who like pushing external battery packs for headset, right? It removes some of the weight from your headset and gives you more hours in VR at any given moment.
Yeah, I think power users and enthusiasts probably use it quite a lot, right? A huge percentage of enthusiasts, people who are really big into VR gaming, likely do use some form of Elite strap or external battery. I mean, the great part about an Elite strap, again, it doesn't have to be Meta's official one. It can be like a Bobo one, a Kiwi one, whatever company you want, is that not only does it give you more battery, but it also acts as an effective counterbalance on the back of your head. So that's what I prefer personally, because then you don't have any cables. There's no real difference to you in use, right? You're not trading anything off other than a bit of cost, because all of that weight's just going to the back of your head.
All right, let's get into this Apple section. I assume that's going to turn off some brains out there who don't really give a darn about what Apple is doing. But we do encourage you to stick around for the conversation in the comments. Hit that like button. Share this link out with your friends. There are plenty of Apple users out there who are just sort of waiting in the wings. They know that, they didn't buy the first generation Apple Watch. They didn't buy the second generation Apple Watch. They waited for the third generation Apple Watch. And I think that is a good thing to a good parallel to think about when we talk about the $3,500 Apple Vision Pro. There are plenty of people, I think that's in our silent viewers out there, who want to hear about Apple Vision Pro. mainly because of that. So let's break these down, David, and let's move through these as quickly as possible because I want you to rest.
Yeah, these are relatively small stories, but they're just things we want to note. The first is that somebody's finally made a good dock for this thing. I'm really glad that this has happened. It is really inelegant to have this kind of combination of your external battery cord plus another cord, and just have your $3,500 headset just sitting there haphazard. And if you knock the battery over, maybe it's going to fall down the side of the table. It doesn't look good at all. It doesn't look elegant. Elegant is the word I'm going to keep using here, because I think the solution they have here, this company PrismXR, is really damn elegant. And we're not in any way sponsored by them. We have no association with them in any way. I just saw this and I thought it looked like a cool solution. So you have a cable storage at the back, so you don't have a cable spooling everywhere. You got USB-C that then passes through to this little USB-C adapter where the battery slots in, and that's full 65-watt charging, which gets you to I think it's like 80% in 40 minutes or something like that. And yeah, it looks good. It looks nice. You get this soft padded material to put the headset down in. Nothing revolutionary here. There's no magic breakthrough technology. It's just, if I have an Apple Vision Pro, yes, I have the travel case, and so that's where I currently put it in a lot of the time, but that adds a lot of friction, especially if you're mostly using this thing at home, right? You have to zip open this case and kind of unfurl the battery and get it up and put it back in. If you just have this here and you can kind of just grab and go, that's a lot better of a solution, I think. And I'm a sucker for a charging dock. I think a charging dock is essential for anyone that has a headset. I really recommend that if you have a Quest, go and get one. Meta's is very expensive, but there are third-party alternatives on Amazon. There are even ones now that use the 3 gold pins on the underneath of the Quest 3, so you don't have to plug it in with USB-C. In fact, this same company makes a Quest 3 charging dock. I don't think I have a picture of it here, but they make one that's quite similar. And yeah, it's much more elegant than shoving your headset into a drawer, or just having it loose on a table, or having a big power cable come out the side of it.
Ryan asking, are Apple stores still offering demos? They don't plan to purchase, just curious and would love to try. Yeah, we saw someone else joking, Davin, up above about this, the ridiculous narrative that Apple has canceled Apple Vision Pro. Yes, you still go and get these demos. You can use the Apple Store app, I think, to schedule those. And it's a wonderful introduction to VR. And I appreciate the people calling out, just liking that they can hear non-meta stuff on this newscast. That's, like some people are tuning in just for that. And we're all desperate for the days when Valve is shipping a new VR headset so that we can talk about Valve as well, as heartily as we talk about these other things that are happening all the time from Apple and Meta. Let's move on to this next subject here, unless there's something you want to talk about first.
Yeah, we just have people pointing out in the comments some of their favorite brands for Quest charging docks, Maker and Kiwi, and yeah, you can go and find a bunch on Amazon, or even go to their website. Sometimes you get it cheaper than on Amazon because they get a bigger cut. Our next Vision Pro topic is the opposite of what you might hear in the popular narrative. So the clickbait narrative you may be hearing in recent weeks is that Apple is going to cancel Vision Pro or stop selling Vision Pro. And the news we have here today is pretty much the opposite. They're actually, next month, expanding Vision Pro to 2 new countries. Vision Pro is coming to the United Arab Emirates and South Korea on November 15th. So that's just over 2 weeks from now. And that will bring the total number of countries that Apple Vision Pro is sold in to 11. So it launched in the US at first, and over time since then, it has expanded to Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, France, Japan, Singapore, China, and now the UAE and South Korea. So in comparison, just for context, when this happened, Vision Pro in 11 countries, Meta sells Quest headsets in 23 countries, including all of the Vision Pro countries except for China and the UAE. Of course, in many countries, you can also buy these products unofficially, but then you're not going to get customer support and warranty and replacement parts, and you're going to have shipping issues and things like that.
I appreciate the comments. A lot of joking around there. What is it? Big saying that they're here for the clickbait. We don't do that. But I appreciate the joke. And then, my Blair Witch moment. My cat is losing its mind in this room. For some reason, one of my cats enjoys my office. It's like the right temperature or whatever, and he loses his mind in here. He's crawling around on all the walls, meowing at me. And you saw me go and get that cat. Let's get through the last Apple section here, and then we've got the Google discussion. I do want to call out the one person saying that they were tuning in for PSVR. I'm sorry.
Yeah, not this week. I don't think we have any PlayStation VR news this week, but we'll always bring you PlayStation VR2 news when we have it. Most recently, I think a month or two ago, we talked about how they'd fixed a bunch of the launch issues with the PC adapter, for example. James O'Loughlin's comment here: for most of the world, Apple's entry into spatial computing is early out of the oven. We would just reiterate what we say over and over again on this show. Vision Pro is the first ever Vision headset. It is a expensive, primitive, early adopter product. Apple did not, despite the takes you may have heard, in any way expect this to be a mass market product. It's a $3,500 product. Of course, they didn't expect it to be mass market. And as we've covered many, many times in this show, we expect, based on a bunch of sources at this point, that next year, 2025, Apple will release a cheaper Vision headset, not a Vision Pro, a Vision Air, or just a Vision, or whatever they end up calling it, somewhere around $2,000, that is lighter and cheaper materials. And we're obviously going to be tracking the rumors and reports about that really closely, because that's where this really can start to begin on its path to taking off. And of course, throughout that time, the software ecosystem is building up. visionOS 2 released 6 weeks ago. We expect to see visionOS 3 at WWDC in June, next summer. And that's the operating system that we expect that the cheaper headset will be running. So we have no idea what kind of features Apple's going to put in visionOS 3. Think of where iOS is at, right? It's iOS 18 now. There's a long way to go. We're in the earliest days of Vision headsets, as we talked about earlier with our meta section. This is still an early product category, and there is a lot of low-hanging fruit to be attacked in the coming decades. Our last piece of Apple news for this week is related to Safari on Vision OS, Vision Pro's operating system. And the news is that it is getting built-in support for spatial photos and videos. So we talked last week about how it's great that Vimeo supports spatial videos now. So you can take a spatial video on your iPhone 15 Pro or 16, upload it to Vimeo on the app, and share it to anyone. But what an even easier way to share things, in a wider way, would be not needing an app at all, just using the good old World Wide Web. And of course, today you can upload to a website or a file sharing service your spatial photos and your spatial videos, and a Vision Pro owner can go in Safari and download them and then open them in the Photos app. But the announcement here, which comes from 2 Apple employees who were interviewed by a photography news website, is that later this year, Safari will get support for embedded spatial photos and videos in Vision Pro. So you'll be scrolling down a website and you will see depth into these photos that are embedded in, and anyone else viewing that photo will just see it in 2D. It's not like it'll break compatibility or anything. And so this will be really cool. And I hope that when this comes out, we'll put up maybe an article of, I don't have an iPhone myself, but Kyle has one, and maybe Ian, you'll have access to one that can take spatial photos by then, and you can take some pictures of headsets and we can embed them into an article. And if you have a Vision Pro, you can scroll down our UploadVR article and see depth into a web page. Well, this will be pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very cool ideas there. And I think we'll just abstract away from that a little bit. I'm appreciating that people still speaking their truth about PSVR 2 out there. Someone out there wants 2 pairs of PSVR 2 controllers in order to just take one off the charging stand, put the other ones on, and let them charge back so they can keep themselves going, or 1 pair to connect to PC and 1 pair to connect to PSVR or the PlayStation 5. The thing, the last subject here on Apple that I want to kind of bring up as you talk about the spatial photos and the idea that that's supported even outside the Apple ecosystem. You've got Apple Immersive Video at the super high end. We've covered that in previous shows, where the bit rate is off the charts. It's foveated so that you're looking at the bit rate, all of the bits as possible when you're actually pointing your eyes in that direction. You're seeing it on an OLED screen, so the the black parts of the scene actually look like black. Credible technology, but I don't like. I think the people out there's a war that is getting played from patents and licensing on up through the things we talked about earlier in the show. Co-watching is a pain in the butt because of the added DRM that gets rolled into this. It seems like a mistake for Apple. Like, it's anti-consumer oriented if Apple focuses more on the formats that get embedded into our own website than on the product itself. Like, at the end of the day, people buy Apple or Meta based on the quality of the hardware that they go and buy. And I would just love to see more focus on the actual quality of the hardware rather than a format war.
Yeah, so the irony here is that there is a kind of format situation going on here where spatial photos are a multi-layer extension of Apple's HEIC format, which iPhones capture and only Safari supports. So as a website, and we all have to do this if we do this, to any non-Safari web users, you're going to have to serve a regular PNG or whatever, a flat image, and there is no conceivable way without licensing this format that Meta browser or Pico browser is going to get support for this. So that is definitely unfortunate. We've yet to see an open standard, at least none that I know that's widely adopted or considered by these companies yet, for doing these spatial photos like this. When it's with spatial videos, it's a little bit easier because it's an extension of HEVC, which a lot of browsers do support, but it's still something you do have to license. Ideally, we would see a spatial a 3D extension to the AV1 format, the more open video format that is starting to be supported in devices and browsers now, as well as in maybe PNG or the new JPEG or WebP and some of these other image standards. This stuff is still very early, but I think this is pretty par for the course for Apple, right? They have many times in their history and even today been happy to stick with proprietary or essentially proprietary technology, ignore the industry standard, and push on. I mean, we're talking about VR and AR. Apple is pretty much the only company that doesn't support OpenXR, right? You cannot build with OpenXR for Vision Pro. They have their own proprietary set of APIs that they use instead. And I don't think Apple has ever really been the company to, unless it's absolutely necessary, go for the open industry standard. And unfortunately, you say that you wish that this was all about the hardware. I think for a lot of people, the decision to buy an Apple product is vendor lock-in, right? It is some of these proprietary standards. If you look at some of the surveys around this, there are a lot of people in the US, for example, we always have this discussion, iMessage versus WhatsApp. There are a lot of people in the US who say that they simply would never consider buying an Android phone no matter how good it was because it doesn't have iMessage, Apple's proprietary messaging platform.
Yep. David just nailed a lot of really complex subjects there in a very short amount of time about the offering that Apple is doing. I think what I'm pointing out there is some risk, right? It's one of the reasons I've spent so much. I own an Apple Vision Pro, I own Quest 3, and I have spent a majority of this year in Quest 3, partially because of what David just said. The vendor lock-in thing is, incompatible with HDMI link, Quest HDMI link, right? I'm now able to port in any display I want or any source I want into this Quest headset. And I need to go pay $300 for a developer strap to have anything close to the connection between my PC and my Vision Pro headset. I need to go pay a Quest 3S on a developer strap to match some of the functionality that Quest users get right out of the box. So, please, for those of you that call me an Apple stooge or whatever, keep this in mind, right? I have spent most of my year in a Quest 3 partially because of its openness and because of its ability to move beyond this vendor lock-in that David is alluding to over here. I think it's time for our final subject of today with a big idea here that we have been waiting a very, very long time to get any kind of an inkling out of these companies that they're actually going to pursue. It's been silent for so long that we almost wondered if this was going into the killed by Google heap before it was even born. Still could happen. But what is this news, David?
Sure. So, Android Authority, the news website, has discovered inside the code of the Google Play Store app for phones that Google is starting to implement support for XR headsets. So, specifically, they find a string that would appear on Google Play Store pages referencing compatibility with XR headset. So this XR headset isn't compatible with this app, is the context that they're giving an example of this for, as well as an icon of what it would look like to remotely install a Play Store app on the headset. So what we see here is Google starting to prepare the Play Store for Android XR. And if you've missed the wider context here, it's now been almost 2 years since Samsung first announced that it was working on a headset with Google doing the software and Qualcomm providing the chip. That chip confirmed to be the XR2 Plus Gen 2, the higher end version of the chip that's in Quest 3 and Quest 3S. And so, that was February 2023 when Samsung first announced this. And then in May of that year, so we're still talking about last year, Google at their I/O conference said we're going to talk more about this partnership later this year. And obviously, we're now in 2024, and that did not happen in 2023. There was very little mention about it ever since. We did see about 4 months ago, Samsung gave an update saying that it's coming this year, 2024, and Google confirmed that they're still involved. So literally all we heard is that still coming, Google's still involved. That's it. It seems unlikely, though, because we'd seen earlier reports that they were planning to release a developer kit in October and then launch it in March. Now, it's possible that they seeded a secret developer kit, but we haven't heard anything. There's been no rumors. There's been no murmurs. There's been no leaks of any sort of that happening. And last month, Daily Korea, which typically has good sourcing with Samsung, being very geographically near, reported that Samsung has delayed this headset into 2025, and that seems more likely to me than some sort of surprise near the end of year launch. So in terms of why this might have been delayed, last year we saw reports that Samsung had basically seen the announcement of Apple Vision Pro and said, oh shit, that's a lot better than what we were going to put out, and gone back to the drawing board. And so they've seen like, wow, that is a pretty impressive piece of hardware and software. We need to really rethink this, which is really interesting, actually, because if you are someone who studies the history of technology or just happen to know this, the same thing actually happened with phones. Google, the team that was working on Android, watched Steve Jobs' iPhone announcement in 2007, that famous, mother of all tech product reveals. You should watch it if you haven't watched it. The Steve Jobs presenting the original iPhone. They saw that and they said, "Oh shit," and went straight back to the drawing board for Android and completely rethought what it's going to be competitive. Because otherwise, they were going to make something that looked like the phones that Jobs brought up in his presentation to laugh at and say, "This is what iPhone is so much better than." So we see the same kind of thing that might have happened again with visionOS and Apple Vision Pro, and that may be why we've seen Samsung's headset. But this is the first indication we've had in a very long time that real progress is being made here. And the Play Store is going to be, we expect, Google's biggest differentiating factor in this platform, this Android XR OS that Google's going to introduce as a third option in the market. So you have Meta's Horizon OS on its Quest headsets, and they say Asus and Lenovo headsets are going to come out with Horizon OS, Apple's Vision OS on Vision Pro, and then the cheaper Vision headset next year, and now a Samsung headset potentially arriving in 2025 with a third operating system, Google's Android XR, with the big advantage being that it's going to have the Google Play Store of 2D apps in the same way that the Apple Vision Pro has a bunch of iPad apps from their regular app store. So both of these companies, Google and Apple, are leveraging their existing platforms to bring forth something that Meta simply does not have. Meta has only in the past month even allowed 2D apps on its store. And if you want to get something like Discord or Slack or Trello or whatever you want to use, those apps are not available on Quest. You're going to have to go through the web browser. And this could be a really huge advantage for Google. I don't expect them to compete in the gaming space, though. I do think this is I think the pitch here is going to be this is an Android version of Apple Vision Pro that's cheaper and lighter.
Yeah, so the thing that I will think about there, the basically thought experiment I want our audience to perform with me here is is the personas and the codec avatars that Meta has had in the wings for quite a long time. Meta, what was it? What Starline? So Google had this Starline project, which was a glasses-free 3D display technology that they were like trying to push into boardrooms, which Cisco has had technology for doing this for decades. Like, I don't see people doing a whole lot of Starline installations just to have one person in each room feel like they're actually present together. The thought experiment is imagine emails going back and forth between Google, Samsung, and Meta, trying to say, we need this. So Samsung saying, we need 2D apps from Google, and they're saying, we need VR apps from Meta. And Meta is saying, that's right. We need 2D apps on our platform. They're saying that to Google. And they're trying to get Samsung to add Meta Horizon OS to their system.
Well, to be clear, we don't know that Meta has reached out to Samsung. There's no confirmed reporting of that.
Yeah, this is a complete thought experiment, complete speculation. What I want you to think about is, imagine one of these companies, like say Meta, shipping an Apple Vision Pro to Google. Imagine them shipping an Apple Vision Pro to Samsung, and the three CTOs of these companies getting into an Apple Vision Pro each and having a persona chat, person to person to person. And you've got these three executives inside these three companies, all inside Apple Vision Pros, and they're absorbing what the competition has brought to bear, right? They're going, oh wow, I feel like you're here with me. We need to do something better than this. And here's Meta in this call on Apple's technology saying, we've actually been working on this for about 7 years now in a very focused way, and we're working on it to bring this to platforms. This is all to say that I feel like that's a killer technology for Meta to bring here, and for Samsung to ship without codec avatars would be a major, major miss. If they go and try to partner on a substandard Google-driven codec avatar ripoff, it's not going to do what the codec avatars out of Meta can do.
Sure. Well, we don't know whether Google has been researching this or not. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that a Google solution would be substandard. Apple was working on this for years, and we didn't know until Vision Pro was announced. There is a lot of the technology behind Starline that is actually somewhat transferable here. We're now in an era where, with Gaussian splatting and a lot of these other technologies, there's a proliferation of suitable talent and technologies that could be applied to this problem. Google is one of the leading AI companies in the world. It's very possible that the Samsung headset comes out and does have an equivalent of codec avatars and spatial personas that is maybe on par with spatial personas. And we haven't seen what Meta can ship in a headset yet. We've only seen Meta's research, which is remarkable, right? We've seen these versions running on a high-end PC, for example, that are near photorealistic. And in this interview, Lex Friedman was saying, like, this is the craziest thing I've ever tried in my entire life. It feels like I'm standing next to someone. But they can't put this in a standalone headset anytime soon. And we don't know what the quality is going to be. And obviously, these also take a massive capture rig, whereas Apple is doing this, you just pick up the headset and point it at yourself. This image that we show here is Meta's version of this, where these are scanned using a smartphone, a 30-second or so smartphone scan, plus cloud processing time. The only company that has shipped something that is actually shipped here is Apple. We don't know yet what Google and Meta can bring to bear in a shipping product.
Yep. So David, playing devil's advocate there, I mean, putting out very, very good points, opposing my view there that Meta's in a class by itself with codec avatars. I mean, that's ultimately, in my mind, 2 years ago now, I went to Meta's research headquarters and I had a face-to-face conversation with a person who felt like they were right in front of me, except they were on the other side of the country. And I leaned around and they made all the expressions and it felt one-to-one like they were actually there. Interesting little side note, you will only hear this on Upload VR because we're the only company, we're the only outlet that pursues this kind of reporting the way we do. Uh, at at a SIGGRAPH conference that David and I were at, we heard Meta tell us that they won't let different people wear different avatars inside. They won't let the one researcher inside Meta wear someone else's codec avatar. That they're synced to one person. And the Orion demo that was given to a developer. I paid attention very closely to the names and I got into talking with the developer. Turned out that Meta had backtracked on that a little bit and they had a different person driving a meta codec avatar inside the Orion glasses than the person who had actually been scanned. I thought it was an interesting little note to think about that they had to have different people do that. And that has follow-on effects on the quality of the face tracking of how good the face comes across and all that. And big privacy implications to think about with codec avatars. You want them to be locked to you. You don't want someone else wearing your face out there in the world. And I appreciated David's context there. I think we're moving to the end of the show here, and I want to get David out of here as much before 2 hours as possible. So I'll leave him to make the closing comments here. I want to say thank you to our audience out there for the incredible discussion that we have week in and week out. Please consider hitting that like button, sharing this link out, getting other people to subscribe to Upload VR. And thank you to our members and patrons for supporting the work that we do. David, let's lead us out of here.
Yeah, I think something you often bring up that we should just note here is that it will be a shame that, from all indications and likelihood, these will be 3 separate systems. It's unlikely that you'll be able to have a photorealistic avatar call from a Vision headset to a Horizon OS headset and also have a third person on an Android XR headset. It seems like for the foreseeable future, this will be 3 separate ecosystems, and there's going to be a lot of consumer clash there. And the big question that we always ask when it comes to the re-entry of Google, we should say, after its spectacular failure of Daydream back in 2018, is which 2 platforms are going to win here? It's very rare that in a space like this, that 3 platforms can survive. It typically is you have the Apple one, and then you have the more open, either slightly or a lot more open competitor for someone else, right? In the computer space, you have Macs and Windows. In the phone space and tablet space, you have Google's Android and you have iPhone. It seems unlikely that there is enough space in the very long term for there to exist, Apple's visionOS plus Meta's Horizon OS plus Google's Android XR, especially when all your purchases are not going to be compatible between these platforms, right? The apps that you buy on the Play Store, from all indication, will not be available on the Meta Horizon Store, and vice versa. All of the apps that you've bought on Horizon Store won't be available on this. So, there wasn't enough space for 3 in the mobile space, right? There wasn't enough space for Windows Mobile there as well. There were competitors to Windows in the 90s that fizzled out there. You could argue that in the tablet space, there kind of is 3 companies. You do have Amazon's Fire OS, which is based off Android but has its own store. It's kind of the most similar thing we've seen to Meta's approach in the market. But you could argue that Google kind of dropped the ball on tablets. In the TV space, you sort of see a lot more competition there, right? But that's a lot less app dependent. You have kind of, in each country, you've got like 5 or 10 streaming services, and these are relatively simple apps that put themselves out on all of these stores. I just wonder what we're going to see happen here. To what extent will this be a meaningful competitor to Vision Pro, and to what extent will it be a meaningful competitor to Quest? I do think a lot of people, especially those who are emotionally and financially invested in an existing solution here, whether it be Apple Vision Pro or Quest and its Horizon OS, underestimate what Google could bring to bear here. We sometimes seem to talk about Google as if, it's a headless chicken or something, like, or it's the village idiot putting together a DIY VR headset out of cardboard. This is one of the world's greatest hardware companies combined with one of the world's greatest software companies. I look at Pixel phones, look at the Nest smart home solutions, look at some of Samsung's hardware. I don't think this is going to be a joke. I think they will bring serious competition to heel here. The question is, will that matter? Will they be beaten up by Apple on the high end and beaten by Meta in the low end and have no room in the middle? Or will they have the perfect middle ground, the just high end enough over Quest to have a meaningful quality improvement to matter for spatial computing and media watching, and then more accessible and in pricing and in terms of compatibility with Android phones globally around the world, which are around the world outside the US more popular than the iPhone, and then have the solution. We'll have to see. I don't think anyone knows the future here. There's no clairvoyance at play here. This is going to be, I think, a fierce three-way battle in the coming decade.
Well, and did you even mention Steam in there? Steam OS? That would be a four-way battle, right?
Sure.
And that's a big one to consider. And, Steam finds magical ways to get on everyone else's platforms, despite how difficult it is.
Yeah, I still see them taking that approach, right? I still see that it's much more likely that maybe they do have their own headset, but in terms of scale, the 5 or 10 year perspective, that their main strategy is that there's a Steam Link app on visionOS, and there's a Steam Link app on Android XR, and we already have a Steam Link app on Horizon OS. And then Valve gets all of these people into their ecosystem that already have this gaming PC or Steam Deck or whatever they're connecting to, without even having to put in the fierce level of hardware competition. It's like a secondary destination, not really a primary competitor.
I loved someone in our comments, I think it was James, mentioning Fire OS, and I laughed at it. And then I remembered that I would love to have an e-ink display on the external display. I would that would solve all the solutions, to have it just say "Do not disturb" without any battery draw on it when I'm in VR, and then have it switch to something else if I actually want to see people. Okay, that's my random thought at the end of the show. David, go ahead, rip it apart.
Oh, I was just going to say, no, I was going to support it. Actually, e-ink googly eyes on the front of the headset would be kind of fun. On Fire OS, I see people laughing at it. I mean, Amazon has a huge market share in tablets, specifically in the low end. They sell $100 tablets, $150 tablets at quite a large scale. They also have a massive share in TVs, right? Fire OS is also running on hundreds of millions of televisions and Fire Sticks. So they do have markets where there are space for more than two players. We just don't know, is the XR market one of them?
Yep. All right. So I love this discussion. As I said before, thank you so much to our audience, our patrons, our members, our readers, listeners, everyone who pays attention to what we say. You are believers in the future of personal computing being very different than the past, and we appreciate your time giving it to us and being on this journey with us. I don't think you get this kind of commentary anywhere else. We appreciate also the devs in our community. I saw Lewis also joking about a cross-platform communication solution potentially being a big idea. So we'll look for you in the future, Lewis, as well as Headset Historian. Thank you for your tweet out there. Not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes they just wear a VR headset. We will see you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to go lie down now. Thank you all. It was great to get on here.
David.
Goodbye. Well, we'll see you next week. And thanks again for the high quality conversation. Please leave a comment below if you're watching this afterwards, or you just didn't think about what you wanted to say during the show. We try to get through as many of the comments as possible when we can. Thanks so much, everyone.